Sorry, I can't speak German. I learned it in 5 years, and then I stopped talking and reading. And when I tried to went back to the language, I realized that I was too old and that I couldn't study a language which I have forgotten as quickly as I would have liked. And I think it will be better if I speak in English, and the majority of you seems to speak German, but I'm sorry, I'm going to speak in English then.
Okay. Thank you very much. Okay, first of all, thank you very much, Pablo González Casanova, for coming here and agreeing to do this session with us, which is, we want to try to learn a bit about your life and your life experiences, especially in the context of the struggles that you have experienced in Mexico and being part and influencing other struggles in Latin America. Of course, in the 45 minutes that we have, we're not going to be able to learn about the whole course of your life, and we have been discussing that before. So we decided that we do 2 main points. One point is your formation as somebody who has been politicized from the beginning, and the second part will be about your involvement in the present movement, like for instance the Zapatistas. So we have these 2 parts of your life. So please, can you start with the first part, like your formation and politicization?
How many minutes?
We have to stop at 7 o'clock.
7, well.
Yeah.
I'll say a few words, because otherwise you wouldn't understand my participation in struggle. First of all, I'm doing exactly what my father asked me to do. You know? I'm not a rebel. He was a rebel. He came to Germany and lived 14 years in Germany, and he used to speak German without accent, and he used to tell me that when he was in the north, he pretended to be born in the south, and vice versa. He learned Yiddish, and previously he had learned Greek, Latin, and Hebrew. He was a philologist. I think he loved very much a girl here, and well, he became socialist, and he admired Rosa Luxemburg, and well, I inherit in part his way of thinking, and in part I lived according to a certain cultural and emotional heritage, which is always mixed in our intellectual work and in our political activities. Then I think another source of my formation is the country itself, and the kind of culture in which I live. You know, it's a very sophisticated country. The people are incredibly smart, and now when I speak with young men and young women who are fighting under very violent and serious conditions, I am admired of their knowledge. And well, I have been invited. I'm not going to talk of the many experiences in my political life, but the most recent ones, and one of them started in 1994, when the Bishop of Chiapas invited me to join him the war had just started, and I was in Cuba with my wife, and we were going to spend a few days after having worked very hard there. When we saw at the TV that something had started in Mexico, and a revolt had started in Chiapas, and we decided to come back to Mexico immediately. And the bishop called me 2 or 3 hours after I had arrived home, and he invited me to go with him to see if we could stop the war. And I don't think there are miracles, but that one was a miracle. It was something quite special, because when you just start the war, it's very difficult to stop it, you know. And he did it. I mean, the bishop, Samuel Ruiz. And the experience of the whole trouble, you know, and the way we start talking with those in government and the owners of the haciendas, no, who are terribly conservative and racist, and with the Zapatistas, who are incredibly sophisticated. That was quite an experience, and well, we, I mean, he and they came to an agreement, and a stop fire order was given by the President of the Republic and by the Zapatistas themselves.
Can you say a little bit more why you were asked? I mean, there must be a history of that, of what you did before in your position in Mexico, that you were asked to be part of that.
I really don't know. I don't know why the bishop chose me, you know. I had previously a certain friendship with another bishop, the one in Morelos. And that's quite interesting, you know, the kind of contribution to religious problems in today's world the theology of liberation has achieved. You know, it's really important when you see what's going on in the Islamic world, not only between the Jews and the Arabs or the Islamists, but between the Islamists themselves and the different sects and the hatred they have. And when you speak with those who are involved and those priests who are involved in the theology of liberation, which now has become more than a theology, I think, because it's part of the Latin American culture. These are Catholic countries, no? And well, there's another previous current of thought and philosophy who comes from radical liberalism, represented in Mexico by President Benito Juárez, and in a worldwide known figure like the Cuban leader, writer, poet, and genius José Martí. They opened in our countries a space of dialogue, a space of respect for every belief, philosophy, etc. And it was a struggle with a great tradition since the 16th century, when priests like Las Casas and others represented what Córdoba, the University of Córdoba, meant in the history of free thinking and the history of dialogue and philosophy. In Córdoba, as you know, before Philip II, before the Inquisition started on the name of God, persecuting the enemies of the king and of God. There existed a university in which, as you know, the great philosophers, Jewish, Catholics, and Islamics worked together. And part of them came to Latin America and started fighting against conquest itself in a very courageous world. And we have this tradition of progressive, open-minded clergy who fought against one of the most awful and authoritarian ways of interpreting religion for the, I don't know if I'm going to use the right word for the divinization of power. In Chiapas, these two currents joined, and in the Zapatista movement, you find a new project of human emancipation, which has tried to be included in the categories of European ways of interpreting and criticizing and opposing capitalism. And some interpreters of what Zapatistas are thought that they are anarchists, but it's not so. On the contrary, what they try to build up is a new kind of socialism, which is not completely original. The idea has existed previously in Europe itself, and they want to give an enormous importance to the participation of society in decision-making, in politics, in economy, in education, etc. And they have achieved this aim. And regarding, for instance, the participation of women, it's impressive to see how women are leaders of the army itself, which is an army of peasants. There are many commanders who are women, and some of them speak wonderfully. I have heard various commanders, and I was very much impressed by one of them, who explained to us that not only men suffer when one of us, she said, is nominated as a member of the government, our government. Women they suffer too. We suffer too. You can't imagine the day I left home and I left my husband in care of the children, how much I suffered. And experiences like that are incredible. And the participation of women is absolutely new in the history of the respect for women, which is already something enriched since 1968, as I was saying in another meeting. But there, it's impressive. it's impressive because they are supposed to be primitive people. And I remember once I said, Levi Brühl, why don't you come to Mexico? Why do you go always to Africa or to other continents? And he said, because there are no primitives in Mexico. What? We are all primitives, I told him. No, I don't mean that, he said. But I'm going to explain to you. Once I was invited to go to Chiapas, and I finally was so happy to have found the kind of savage I was looking for, when suddenly a girl came with a pencil and a little book and said, Monsieur Levi Brühl, don't you want to put your signature in my book? That was the savage. And that's what you can see in the Zapatista movement, you know? You can see young men who have read Shakespeare and Cervantes, of course, and the great Spanish authors of theater and poetry, and who have read Marx and who have read Lenin, and you are surprised to see a new way of expression, because they don't quote Lenin, they don't quote Marx, they don't speak of socialism. The word socialism for us means what we always have wanted to realize and to construct in the world. But in the 80s, for many people, it was not an acceptable word. And they are very clever, you know. They have been resisting 500 years. This is a colonization which lasts more than 500 years, and the way of speaking is very clever. They say they fight, and this is quite common, for libertad, democracia, justicia. And if you remember, there is one book Engels wrote, and in his final words he says, Marx and myself, we fought all our life for freedom. And that's the way they interpret the way the same word Marx used. But without saying that Marx used it, and they have read the books I'm talking about. Then they are very, very, it's a great experience I could talk about. The way they have improved and created a new political and revolutionary literary gender, in which they mix the political and revolutionary message with with stories and with the happiness of life, you know. There is a mixture of genders in what they say and in the way they say it. And another example I could give you of this kind of sophistication was once when I was invited to a seminar in the forest, and I was invited to chair the seminar, and Alain Touraine and several famous American and European intellectuals were there, and many leaders of the revolutionary movements of Latin America. And when we got to a place where there was no electrical light and no light at all, when we arrived there, many colleagues of mine, European, American, were really worried and tired. And when I asked who wanted to speak, everybody wanted to speak, you know, and there were several leaders of guerrillas, and etc. And I gave the word to a conservative professor. I was a French conservative professor who was there, and he was very happy to start talking. And they wanted to let the people talk, you know, even if they are not Zapatistas, if they are not Marxists, if they are not, let's talk, let's have the possibility of a dialogue. In another seminar, I learned how to increase the personal strength to resist, because it's very difficult to live on the conditions they live. They are permanently attacked or by the lords of the land, or by the government, or by the paramilitary forces, counterinsurgency forces, and they explained to us how to be strong in face of that, and to keep going on having the pleasure of life. And it was very interesting because the person who asked us that told us, well then get up, take the hand of the person of your right and the person of your left, and now you are going to see how we are stronger, and this is, and he started giving us orders to sit down, to jump, to etc. And after a while, we were all of us laughing and having the sensation that there was a communication, you know, a mutual communication, and that we really were ready to fight whatever enemy could dare attack us. Well, I think that now, recently, this year, they gave a proof, and I'm going to finish that part. They gave a proof of what they have been doing all this time, when the press doesn't speak anymore about them. They don't appear in TV, and if you don't appear in TV, you don't exist. And they showed us that they do exist. They took the 5 cities that they had taken with the arms. They took these same cities peacefully, with unarmed women and men who joined forces and silently walked thousands of people in the streets of the 5 cities. And then they went back to the forest. They have a capacity of communication with the rest of the nation that it's very difficult for the government to attack them. They may sometimes, we are living in a very violent world and country. But I hope that they won't be able to, because it's very difficult to attack such a project. It's a project which is not for the Indians. It's not for Latin America or the Mexicans. It's a human project which shows that they can solve the problems which the country can't solve. They have school. Every child has a school, and they have a university. All of them eat. All of them have a doctor. And they are poor. But they have invited me, and after coming to Germany, I'm going to a school. It's called La Escuelita, the little school. And I'm not going to be a teacher. I'm going to be a student. And I want to see what they teach me, you know. But I'm sure that I'm going to learn a lot of things. I have made my postdoctoral studies there, and I asked one of them, well, I've been saying to everybody that I have made my postdoctoral studies with you. Now what are you going to teach me? This is an actualization course. He's laughing, of course. Well, another experience I have lived, and I think it's better to speak about that. Are you ready? Has been a long experience. It's an experience with Cuba. I'm very critical as a person. I'm not a political man in the sense of hiding something or saying something which is exaggerated. I'm not going to talk to you as a scholar. And please, I suppose there are questions and interventions of the public. Well, you may say or make an adverse comment if you want. But I have been with the Cuban Revolution before they went. They were in the government, and up to now. And it's impressive what they have done. And you know, it's very strange, because neither you, neither them consider that what they are doing is a human experience. We go on thinking that about the human experience and about humanity and about the world is a task which doesn't correspond to the periphery of the world. And we have the same attitude. With some exceptions, like myself, I feel at home here, you know. I know that I might have been German. But what they have done is really, if you think how aggressive the United States government is in the world, and the military complex is the manager of interventions in the whole world. If you imagine that this country, when the 26 de Julio movement won, was a country of peasants, in which the majority of the people didn't know how to read. And they have, for instance, in medicine, they have advancements which are recognized by the scientific community of the world. And in school, at the university, in construction of the infrastructure of the city, and they have made an enormous effort to improve the limitations, because if we look at the different socialist countries, for instance, the problem of women was not solved at all. I never was invited by the Soviet government, because I was critical. I think that you can't have socialism without democracy, neither democracy without socialism. It's absolutely incompatible. You can't have the heart working if you have lost the rest of the body, etc. Well,
How did you become involved?
Pardon me?
How did you become involved? Did you say you were with them before
Well,
the
okay.
government?
Well, I became involved because I went to study to France. I got there my PhD, and a neighbor of mine was a doctor, a Mexican doctor, and he was Catholic and very religious, and he changed his mind, and well, the story is long. He became doctor of Fidel, before Fidel. But I met Che Guevara at home because my first wife, I married twice, my first wife lived in Argentina when she was a child, and once she called me. I was working at the university, and she said to me, well, you know, there's a young man who is a friend of the family, and I invited him to have tea with us, and please come at time, etc., etc. And I met a young man, and when he went, I said to my wife, well, next time if you invite another Argentinian, invite somebody who is not as crazy as this one is. And after a few years, I went to Cuba in '59, and I went to see him, and I explained to him what I had said to Natasha, was the name of my wife. He said, I realized. And well, the way the leaders live, you know, the kind of car which has another friend of mine. I have some friends at the government, and his car is it's irresponsible to have such a poor car, and they have no home, they have nothing. You know, and, Forbes said that Fidel Castro was one of the greatest millionaires in the world. He called his he has assistants, you know, work for him. Why do they say that I am in the 7th rank of the billionaires? Why is 7? Why not 6 or 8? And they went and they discovered that Forbes calculates a percentage of robbery according to a percentage of the gross national product and as Castro had been so many years, they calculated that he would have such a fortune. And then he said, if you find that I have $1 million, $100,000, $10,000, $1 in a bag, then I'll resign immediately. And Forbes was obliged to give an excuse of what they had said. They are very honest, you know, and you realize that the moral speech, the ethical speech, has has two senses. One may be rhetorical or humanitarian, or maybe three senses. One rhetorical, one humanitarian, and another is related with power policy. Because if people trust what you say and trust you, this is to have power. But they made many other things, you know. For instance, once I was with a chauffeur who told me that he had been working in a factory and that 80% of the workers are soldiers, etc. They have at the same time done all this kind of education, and they have improved themselves in the values. For instance, the respect for women, you know, there is enormous because women participated. Some of the great leaders of the revolution were women, but they have also changed in relation to homosexuals. And the daughter of the president now is director of an institute. And it's a socialism which, as they say, inherits not only Marx, but Marx. And if you ask me which theoretical book Marquis wrote, I'll tell you, he didn't write any theoretical book. But when I got that question once, I said to myself, well, there is an epistemological problem. There are certain problems which are not solved through logical reasoning, but emotionally. And then I found that American scholars of cognitive sciences have studied this kind of knowledge we have. Well, what I want to say is that the whole culture of that country has changed and has overcome very serious influences. When the Soviet one was very strong, I didn't feel happy. I said to my friends, the only thing which has improved is yogurt. You made better yogurt since the Soviets came. But at that time, they went back to the history of this radical liberalism Marquis represented, and they opened their mind, and great intellectuals like Noam Chomsky go and visit Cuba, and I was invited by Fidel once to have dinner with Chomsky. And we went talking up to 6:30 in the morning when an assistant of Fidel came and said, Honorable President, the problem is that you have a speech in Santa Clara and the people is already coming. Yes, well, excuse me. I think I've been talking too much. And yes, he had been talking too much. But I'll finish with this. Once, when the revolution started, he used to speak during 5 hours, and he was criticized, terribly criticized by the press. Well, they criticized him always, but I said, well, that's 5 hours, that's too much. And when I went there, and I tried to explain myself why does he talk that long, and I realized that he was transmitting the culture of decision making, as our colleagues would say, to the people, and explaining to them that if we take this decision, these are the consequences. If we take this other, these are the consequences. Which one shall we take? Any decision we take has bad consequences. Which one? And the people were learning to take decisions, you know. Now, this doesn't mean that there are not contradictions in we must realize that class struggle and struggle for independence or against imperialism goes on when the people takes power, and here are many young men who are going to live that, I'm sure. It's dogmatic what I say. You are going to live a new epoch and a new socialism, a real one. And you must realize that one of the one of those who started this new kind of socialism was Cuba, and the other one is are the Zapatistas. And there are new experiences also in South America, which I know less, though I have been once or twice in Venezuela. I know Evo Morales and Correa, who studied in Belgium with a priest who is a very good friend of mine, and now he's teaching at the University of Havana. He's a priest. There is what Chomsky said, a great movement of universal relevance. It's not only for Latin Americans, and we must establish, and you must establish, a permanent dialogue with these people, because the kind of socialism we want is experienced by them, and is part of their life and of their plans. And I thank you, and I think it was better to talk of these two experiences than to tell you something about my life.
Thank you very much. Muchas gracias, Pablo González, por lo que nos has enseñado. Muy bien.
A ver si hay oposición en alguien.
No tenemos tiempo para la oposición. We have keine Zeit und Fragen und...
If somebody doesn't agree with what I said, my email is very easy to remember. It's just Casanova at UNAM.mx. Thank you.
Jeder soll seinen Stuhl mitnehmen.
Genau.
Das ist ein schwieriger Fall.